same hum. Okay, let me turn this on.
You can use this, right?
Good. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Good. All set. So we'll just do the the opening prayer, and the Gita Dhyanam we'll do later on, because I think we're going to spend a few more days before we go into the Gita, so we can wait for that. So let's just you can just follow me. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvina Vadhitamastu. Tejasvina Vadhitamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good. Okay. Well, welcome you all to the fourth class. Can't believe it's already the fourth class. So a quick revision of what we did last week to make sure that there is continuity. And just to reiterate, the study of Vedanta is like the study of any subtle subject. And a subtle subject means something which has a lot of details to understand, to relate to, like medical science or engineering or something like this. So there needs to be a preparation and readiness to engage into this study of the subtle science. You cannot be an accomplished doctor unless you follow a structure. It was interesting. I'm just sharing something personal with you. When I first understood Vedanta, when I was first introduced to Vedanta in 1973, it sounded very good to me, and something that really was something that I was willing to follow. And that continued on for a couple of years. When I was studying with Swami Chinmayananji in 1973, then came an important conversion in my thinking, and that was done by my Guru Swami Dayanandji. And in talking to him, I found out that it is something that needs to be studied structurally. That was not clear to me. You know, my background is computer science. I have a master's in computer science from Berkeley, and I worked for IBM for a number of years, and then with Hewlett Packard. Oh, by the way, I apologize for one thing. The microphone and the speaker are not working. It is a very large hum, which was there on the first class, so I should really raise my voice a little bit. We'll fix it for next time, but for this time around, sound is going to be a problem. So anyway, I was an engineer and skeptical about all these kinds of things and so on. What really transformed my thinking was the studying with Swami Dayanandji, where he said, this is a subtle subject that you have to apply to, and you have to learn this in a very structured manner. Like in medical science, you're not going to go into the advanced study of it without going through Biology 101 and so on. So the reason I'm saying, anyway, two things I wanted to say. One was that once that happened with me, I was completely convinced that I need to really study this in a structured form. Then I decided to leave my job and study with Swamiji for 2.5 years. It was somewhat of a brave decision, and I thank my wife for agreeing to it, but I did it. So that was one thing. Also, in the relevant of this is the reason I'm bringing it up, is that this is a structured way of building up what we are studying. And so I would hope that if you miss a class, you get a chance to review the lessons, and therefore a little revision of the previous class is also part of the structure. It's sort of building up kind of a thing. You cannot, I'll be using some words later on that if you're not familiar with, then it wouldn't make the same thing to you. Anyway, I just wanted to give you that. So what we did last week was to point out that Vedanta is saying something absolutely unique and outlandish. Just amazing. It is saying you are already free, but you don't know it. Because the normal approach that all of us follow in our lives is that I am improving myself and I'm putting myself in new situations that will be better for me. So all of our lives' actions are based on that premise. So, in fact, there is a Sanskrit word that characterizes this. It's called bhava. So bhava means a life attitude of a life of or a life attitude of either one of becoming. So the word Sanskrit bhava, just to give you some etymology for it, comes from the root bhu, which means to be. So bhava means to become. So this characterizes our attitude towards the whole life, which means that it's a very, I think I may have seen, I'm not sure that I drew this very quick diagram, I may not have done so, but our life consists of the following. It's a circle. Point A is self-assessment. How am I doing today? How's life with me? And everyone's assessment is, I'm okay, but I could be doing better. So if each one of us comes here and I say, please describe your life, and so I'll say, how are you doing? I'm very happy, and I'm doing this, and so on and so forth. But there's always a but in the end, which will say, but what I'm really looking for is I'm not completely done. I want to do this. I want to change my job. I want to learn some new skills. I need to change this, all kinds of things. Okay, so not how am I doing? And so this brings up to B, which means some actions on my part which will bring us to B. And so the B means there is a change from A to B. You've made some changes in your life. And then at that point in time, you are assessing, am I better? Am I worse? Am I different? And invariably, it's a circle. You say, I am not. You can even have a C here, which will say option C. It is a life of becoming, which is an unending cycle. For those of you that may know some Hindi, you will see there's a one called, I think this is interesting. In Hindi, it is called Bhavasagar. So Bhavasagar means the ocean of becoming. Sagar means ocean. Ocean of becoming. And the word ocean is used because it is like trying to cross the ocean by swimming. This is exactly what we are doing in our lives. Entire life we are trying to get better by saying, not well with me today, but if I did the following things, I would be better. And then the life ends, and you assess yourself, well, I tried to do the best I could. There's nothing else that I could do. Time to leave again. This is the life as usual. So this is challenged by Vedanta. So Vedanta says, look at this. Can you get tired and say, you know what, I don't want to change. I just want to be what it is. That is unacceptable because there's a certain inner feeling that I am not completely well. You cannot get rid of that. It is kind of like a background shruti. I am not well, I am not well, I am not well. And as Swami Dayananda used to say, that shruti is interrupted by a happy hour. You have a couple of drinks. And the reason you like a happy hour is because for that 1 hour with 2 drinks, which are half price, which is good, so you don't have to spend as much, you forget this feeling that all is not well with me. You feel all is okay, I don't care, I'm okay. After the alcohol has worn off, the back to the Shruti again, all is not well with me, all is not well with me. And in fact, I tell you, this is the thing that we will study more. There is a natural happy hour given by Ishvara, which is your deep sleep. In the deep sleep, you do not complain. Your list of undone things are still there, doesn't matter. You are okay. But then again, you get up in the morning, it's the same list is still there. I'm not okay, I'm not okay, and I'm not okay. To this, Vedanta says, hey guys, here's the situation. The type of gain that you are seeking is not the type where you don't have it and you want to get it. It is the type where you have it and you don't know it. It is praptasya prapti, natu apraptasya prapti. And you say, what? You must be kidding. How is that possible? Is it possible that that's not there? That's not my experience. So how can that be possible? And our scriptures say, yeah, it's possible. You try it. No, you don't have to take my word for it. You keep on trying. And in fact, this is exactly what everybody does. We just keep on trying different things and so on and so forth. It is all a bhavasagar. It becomes an ocean. This is like trying to swim across the ocean. Can't do it, guys. Cannot do it. So the only, either you can say it is not possible, and that is not the very concept of God means there is not possible. This is like a cruelty of the worst kind, that you want something but you'll never get it. It is just that we're looking at the wrong place. It is praptasya prapti, natu apraptasya prapti. And so means it is a gain of the already gained, but not recognized. To which we then put up all kinds of doubts. How is that possible? How is that possible? How can I have something? Well, that happens every day. We saw the examples of the credit card. We saw the examples of the key, the passport, and the 10th man example that we saw was a very key one. That you just are overlooking a fact that was not there before. you are making an inventory which is incomplete. You forgot to put a couple of factors in, and if you do that, you will discover that your quest for unconditional freedom is misplaced. That's all. So this we saw last week. This is all old ground. Okay. Now this fact that my lack of freedom, lack of happiness, is of the second type, not the first type. This is why there's a building up process. You have to first see that. If it is the second type, then Vedanta says that because it's the second type, the entire set of your actions in life will have to be completely different. Will have to be different. How so? So, we saw that if you're trying to get the gain which you don't have is of that type, pardon me, if your life is of the type of not yet gained, then the most important thing is karma, actions. You have to be busy. You have to acquire the tools to do it. And so, as we saw, knowledge plays a secondary role. Action plays a primary role, isn't it? So that's why we saw the example that if you have to go from place A to place B, you have to find some ways to get there. You have to find a conveyance. You have to be ready. You have to have money, whatever it is. If it is the second type, then your entire attitude has to completely change. So what that means is that there is some action required, but primarily it is knowledge that is required. Because knowledge is missing. Because I feel that I don't have the freedom. I don't have the freedom. So this is the lack of knowledge. And if someone has to convince me, then yes, somebody will have to say, like in the 10th man example, there was this wise person who says, line up in front of me. Because this lining up is very important. Because when you have people all over the place, you can make some bad decisions. But if it is very clear cut, this is number 1, number 2, are you all with me? Yes. Number 3, still with me? Yes. 4, you are the 10th man. Then a smile comes on my face. Says, oh my gosh, how could I miss it? So some action is required. So similarly, as I was mentioning my own personal case, that once I figured out, oh my God, I used the credit card last night to make a purchase on Amazon. So I know it is there, and I didn't go anywhere. Now I am absolutely relaxed. Well, I haven't found it yet, but I am totally relaxed. So now the actions are, where is it? It's there in this room somewhere. So there is some action involved. But the main thing was the knowledge that it is not lost. What I think was lost, it is not lost. So therefore, now we begin the next phase of following the classification of unconditional freedom as the second type, not the first type. This is where the sophistication and the subtlety of the knowledge comes in. In other words, the more subtle, the more sophisticated the knowledge, the better preparation I require. So what it means is that the end result is true, but I don't get it. So, you know, that classical example we saw, this is an important example actually, I'll build on this today, that what is called the end knowledge, which is in Sanskrit called sadhya. Sadhya means what is to be established. And as an example, let's take this Einsteinian example, Einsteinian equation rather, not equal. Einsteinian equation, E is equal to mc squared. So this would be an example of a sophisticated, subtle, to be established knowledge. Here's an interesting thing. Swami Dayanand used to say that. He says, you know, let's analyze an equation. What is an equation? An equation is, first of all, if you say 2 equals 3, this is not an equation. It's a false thing. It is not possible. If you say 2 equals 2, this is not an equation. What are you telling me? 2 is equal to 2. It doesn't mean anything. But if you say 2 plus 2 equals 4, a very interesting thing happens. This is obvious for some people and not obvious for others. If you get hold of, if you have anyone close by who's 2 years old or less, give them this equation. And say, what? All you can do is to put 2 apples here, and then you have to tell them 1, 2, 3, 4. They've never heard of the word 4. So it has to be done. It is not obvious. All that means is that the equation has to be understood at a certain level. So for example, you have this x plus y squared divided by z cubed equals z minus 5. I don't know, I'm just making up some things. If somebody gives you all those unequal elements to understand, you can be solved. So the E is equal to mc squared is one of those. E is equal to mc squared is one of those. So what that means is, so you can now do this, the sadhya requires the appropriate eligibility. And preparation. This in Sanskrit is called sadhana. So all these words, sadhanas, sadhya, siddha, they all come from the same root, siddh. But here sadhana means the means to understand sadhya. It's called sadhana. Okay. So the question is, so now we are, I will tell you what the equation is that we have to understand. Okay? And I'll just quickly mention it and then we'll explain it later, but I just wanted to mention it. The sadhya means, remember what sadhya means? Sadhya means what is to be established. So it's an equation. E is equal to mc squared is a sadhya. So the sadhya that we have to see is the limited individual equals the unlimited whole. The limited equals unlimited. Not obvious. What the heck is this? How can be? This is exactly like saying x plus y is this, minus cubed, etc. All those kinds of things. This equation has to be understood. This is the subtlety of it. Which means that you, the seeker, is in fact the sought. You are already complete. This is what it means. This is a phenomenon, this is a fantastic statement. And this is the explanation of the type 2. Praptasya prapti. This has to be understood. So now the question is, clearly I don't get it. I don't get it. And the only thing I can say is that the person who is saying is mad. They're making up some kind of a thing and so on. There's no reason to be mad. This is the only spiritual knowledge that has really passed the test of time. It is not just some flaky thing that was brought about. This has been there for a long time, well preserved in a certain part of the world, and just not understood. And you're welcome to look into it. And at first, you may not understand it, but you will. In fact, they say that really it's interesting, the difference between a falsehood and truth is inquiry. If you do not inquire, falsehood can appear as truth. But if you analyze, come closer and inquire, the truth comes out and the falsehood disappears. Whatever that happens to be. You know, from a distance it may look like it's some kind of a real fruit. My wife has a kind of a plate of such nice looking fruits that I'm telling you, do not do not bite into it. It's all, well, you cannot anyway, but it's very heavy. Very heavy. So on the surface of it looks like a beautiful bunch of apples, bananas, and so on. Very nice. But if you do not inquire into it, Swami, one of the books that I was reading, Swami Maheshananji, he was saying one time he was invited to somebody's house, and they offered him a meal, but they didn't offer him any fruits at the end of that. And so there was a plate of fruit sitting there. He reached for it himself. And so the host said, "Sir, please, that is false. That is not true." This is exactly what it is. So therefore, my self-assessment is false because I have not analyzed it enough. And if I do, it transforms itself into a certain truth that was unavailable to me, or not visible to me, not understood by me. Anyway, enough said about that. So this is the equation that we will keep front and center as we go through the teaching, and hopefully by the end of this whole thing, you'll get a much better idea of the possibility of the limited becoming unlimited. We will see that. So for doing this, we have to start with the next building block that we're going to look is the analysis of truth. What do you mean by truth? Analysis, classification, etc., whatever you may call it, of truth which equals reality. They really are two same thing. Truth means that it should be real. It should not be, it may appear to be false, but it has to be real. So a fruit is real because it is a real banana. And you can smell it, you can peel it, you can eat it, but one that looks like a fruit is not a real thing. So the truth and reality are one and the same. So the analysis of truth is a very important aspect of following through this equation. So now let's look at it. What Vedanta says is that we don't have the tools to understand the classification of truth. Learn the tools. How do I learn the tools? There are 3 different classes of truth that we should be aware of. Okay? One is called true. Just says true. And the definition of true is not untrue under any circumstances. Any conditions. Nothing. Right? Because otherwise it will become conditionally true. Now, we are not talking about conditional truth. We are talking about truth. Nothing to do with it. So, this is the one classification of truth. Now, one can say, does something like this exist? Is that possible? And we will prove that it is. And it's a very surprising answer. But hold on to it. We'll go into that later. Right now, we're just analyzing the tools of truth. So one is true. The second one is untrue. By the way, let me write down the Sanskrit for it so that at the same time. So the true or truth, truth would be a better word, is called Satyam. And the difference between Satyam and Sat is Satyam means truth and Sat means true. So the quality of being true is called truth, right? So this is anyway. So this is called Satyam. So this is number one. The second one is not true. It's also called Asatyam. So the means not. Asatyam. And how is it defined? It is defined as not true under any circumstances. And there are not that many examples of it. In true, there's only one example. In untrue, there are not that many, but there are there. The classical example is a square circle. Not true. There is no such thing as a square circle. It's either a square or a circle, but there is no such thing as called a square circle. And the classical example given in the Shastra was is a child born from a barren woman. So they did this but now we cannot use that example anymore because of all kinds of funny stuff that goes on. So I stick to the square circle for the time being. So anyway, that's called Asatyam. Now comes the important one. The third type, so there's only three types, right? So one is Satyam, the other one is Asatyam, and the third one is called Mithya. And in fact, I would say that the word myth may have been derived from Mithya. I think English came after Sanskrit. So it's very possible that the word myth, and it's actually somewhat applicable, not completely, called myth. So Mithya means neither Satyam nor Asatyam but a little bit of both. little bit of both. So let's take an example of this. How do you mean a mithya which is neither thing? So suppose there is a big wave in an ocean. Okay? Now, the big wave of the ocean, let's say this is the ocean, and this whole thing is an ocean. And this is an example, but assume that the ocean is relatively satyam, in the sense that it is always is consisting of water, and the water is I'll explain this more in a minute. Let me just go on to the mithya. The wave is the mithya. How? So we can now classify. This is an important thing for us to see. In fact, I'm going to draw two columns. One column is satyam, and one column is mithya. And this is with respect to this example. Then we can apply it to our own lives a bit later on, but just from the standpoint of this example. Satyam is the water. And the mithya is a shape in the water called a wave. This can also be seen to be like, for example, a piece of a broken ice floating in the ocean. And in fact, that's an interesting example because a wave has very little longevity. It disappears very quickly, whereas if you have some kind of an iceberg broken off, it can stay for a long time, like a human being. So we will see in the end that human being is like a wave. Okay. And then we will see what the satyam is in a minute. But anyway, let's draw the qualities of these two. So now, satyam, the water, is not born or dies. In that example, we know that oceans can also be created and so on. That's a different thing. But just staying within the example, the water does not have a beginning and an end. Wave does. A wave has a beginning and an end. Mithya has a beginning and an end. Satyam does not have a beginning and an end. A consequence of this is that suppose for a minute, let's imagine that the water has consciousness. So the water has imagine that it has the consciousness is in the water. So the water says, I am secure. Why is it secure? Because it's not afraid of dying. Because it doesn't die. A wave is very insecure. As soon as it is born, it is cognizant of the fact that it is not going to last very long. In fact, it's very interesting, to think about it, that the human beings don't think about death that often. Only when you have some mortality, like you can always say, my goodness, I went to the garlic festival 2 years ago. I could have been there. Do you think about mortality? My God, how can happen? It can happen. So otherwise you are just blasé. As a child you are blasé, as so on and so forth. Then when you get to be my age, you start to look at the wrinkles and so on, and you say, oh my God, I don't have that. So you think a little bit about mortality. This is an amazing thing, really. And you know what Vedanta says is the reason we are not completely blown over by our mortality is because deep in our hearts we know we are immortal. If we didn't know that, it may be very subconscious, it doesn't come up to the surface, which is the truth, as we will discover. But at least it doesn't bother us on the surface per se. Anyway, so let's go on with this list. So it is insecure. The water, the satyam, is independent. The mithya is dependent. And in fact, it's very interesting. There's a lot of, I could go on for this, I'm trying to make sure that we make progress. So, normally, every object has its own name, unique name. Every object has, so the name and the object are intricately linked together. So every object has a name. So it's a possibility you may have more than one name that are synonyms. Like for example, for water you can say H2O. And you can use some in different languages, pani in Hindi. So that is possible, but every object has one name. Now we ask, why are there two names for the same object? What are the two names? Water and wave. Are there two different objects? Somebody may say, yeah, they're two different objects. If there are two different objects, they both should have an independent reality. Like supposing there is a table and there is a chair. The chair has its own identity. It can move. The table has its own identity. It is sitting here. They are two words with different things. But can the wave separate itself from the water? Like a chair can be separated from a table. Then why are we giving it two names? Why can't we just call it water? Because it is the glory of water that it can have something that has a name and form, even though it is non-separate from it. This is called mithya. So now, very interestingly enough, you can see that the content of wave is water. The taste of wave is water. The weight of the wave is the weight of the water. It has nothing independent except for a name and some function. In the case of golden ornaments, the ornaments have the same weight as the gold, the same luster as the gold, same touch as the gold. Everything is gold. but it has some kind of a name and functionality. Here, Swami Dayanand used to say that. He says, supposing, this is the way we get confused by mithya. Because what we say is that a mithya means a quality, it should mean a quality. So the noun should be water and the quality should be waviness, isn't it? Because the water, it can be wavy, it doesn't have to be wavy. So similarly, for example, supposing you have a chain made out of gold. What we talk about there is a golden chain. This is how we say, I bought a golden chain. So when you say a golden chain, which one is the noun? Chain is the noun, and gold is the quality, because it can be a silvery chain, golden chain. Swamiji used to say that this is absolutely inappropriate. You have now elevated the quality to a noun and you've discarded the noun to be a quality. In fact, what you should do is to say chainy gold. This would be much closer to the truth. Why? Because the gold can be chainy, it can be melted back into a non-chaininess. Doesn't make any difference to it. There is no born, no die, it is secure. So one of the this is an important segmentation, that the dependency of the mithya means it is depending on satyam, and it is masquerading as something else. Okay, so therefore what we have to see is, again, this is just a statement that needs to be proven. Anything that has a name and form is mithya. Anything. This is a very dangerous statement. Very powerful statement. Anything that has name and form, in Sanskrit called nama. Nama is name, and rupa is a form. It is not satyam, it is mithya. And if it is a mithya, then we now have a very interesting issue on our hands. Why? Because that must mean, by the very definition of the analysis of the truth, that anything that has a form is dependent on something else. It doesn't have its own existence. It doesn't have an independence. You cannot walk away on its own and say, this is me. Because that alone is the definition of truth. So this is why we say that the mithya has a little bit of satyam. See, it is not as though it has no satyam. The examples given, this gold and ornament example is a very, very interesting one in the Indian context. So as you know, gold is very popular in India. And especially at the marriage time, when the bride is bedecked with some golden ornaments, this is a very important time. And this is a very typical scene. So a young woman gets married, and the gold comes from the parents, because usually she doesn't have enough money to get all of this and so on. But the taste of the fashion comes from the woman, not from the mother. She says, Mom, I don't like this at all. I like this one. She says, no, daughter, this is not good. Don't you see? This is not a traditional. She says, I don't know. Things have changed a lot. You are the old time. So there's a lot of fighting going on mithya. See, that's the point. You cannot say that the mithya is non-existent. Why? Because there is a fighting going on. And the father is sitting there and saying, okay, you two decide whatever it is. I have to pay for it. And not only that, it's interesting. Then the goldsmith shopkeeper also is very agnostic. He says he doesn't care. He says, oh, you can take this or you can take that. And he winks at the father, and they both look at each other and said, foolish people, they're fighting over something that doesn't make any sense. So this is the thing. Mithya does have certain aspects of Satya. If the Mithya was not there, they would not be fighting. They'll say, you know, this is all from the Indian context. They will say, Mukesh Ambani's daughter got married, and he gave 200 pounds of gold to his daughter, or something. I don't know. He probably spent much more than that. What it means is not 200 pounds of a lump of gold. It's all an ornamentation. So the references are different, but the fact is that the ornament has no real reality. This is a very important thing that we see. And it should now give you a little bit of an introduction to ourselves as formful individuals. We all have a form. We have a body, we have a mind, we have sense organs, we have life-giving properties, prana. There's a lot of very sophisticated, formful things that we have, right? And we are very concerned with it. How do I look? And how is my body? I hope that I can be more healthy if I eat this, and no carbs, this, that, or the other. All very concerned about. It is exactly like the mother and the daughter fighting over the ornaments. I'm very concerned about all on a formful thing. Unconcerned, unaware about what the form resides on. So there one can make a judgment that the involvement with mithya is relatively immature, and the involvement with the content of mithya is relative maturity. So for example, I don't know much about this, but apparently there are different carats of gold. So one of the things that happens is that gold in its purest form is very brittle, and you cannot really cannot make ornaments out of it. So you have to mix it with non-gold to make it more malleable and so on. And so there the mature father and the mother can both talk to the goldsmith and say how much content of the gold it is. And if I were to sell it in the marketplace, how much will be? So they're looking at a more mature value of the thing. The young woman, for example, is unconcerned about that. All she wants is a pretty looking chain. So therefore, we can postulate that we are from a standpoint of spirituality, immature. Why? Because we are very concerned about our forms. We don't yet know the value of the satyam that the mithya is depending on. I'm unaware of it. This is part of the thing saying, how can it be that I don't know myself and this, that, or the other. This is part of it, big part of it. And so the Vedanta says, in fact, it makes a statement that we'll have to prove later on. Satyam is formless. It has to be formless. How can we say that? Satyam has to be formless. Because if Satyam is formful, then where does the form reside on? That is not Satyam. Because by its very nature you can say that mithya is dependent on something else. It has a beginning and an end. So if Satyam also is formful, that changes the whole definition of Satyam. So by definition, Satyam is formless. And to understand formlessness is the sophistication and subtlety of this knowledge. This is where preparation is required. There's a very beautiful example given on at a relative level. This is at the absolute level that we are talking about. But at a relative level also, this concept that you need to have the right tuning, the right preparation to understand the subtlety of it in the following way. So to see an object, you just need a pair of eyes. To see something that the object consists of, you need some help. You need either some kind of an instrument, and the instrument has to be consistent with the subtlety of what you're looking at. So if you're just looking at bacteria, then I don't know what is used for that. I don't know. But supposing you're looking for virus, which is more subtle than bacteria, then the instruments for detecting virus are more subtle. If you're looking for particles, that's even more subtle. So the sadhana is appropriate to sadhya. And the sadhana that we need to have to understand the subtlety of my formlessness. It has to be my formlessness, as we will prove. The sadhana for understanding the subtlety of, you cannot even say subtlety. Satyam is absolutely subtle, subtlest. You need the proper mind's thinking. This is the issue. Our minds right now are like childlike. Spiritually, we are childlike. We can understand maybe 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. But the moment you say 6 is equal to 4 minus 2 or 4 or 5, I have to think about it. And then if you raise it a little bit more than that, I give up. This is exactly what happens. That I am born and I have a life to live and this is how I can improve myself. This I can get. This I can get that. But the moment you say, my goodness, all formful things are mithya, then I say, I don't understand what you're talking about. I give up. Because I haven't really been equipped with the knowledge to even analyze. My instruments are too lacking. Because this, a fact of the matter is that the very existence of the word knowledge requires readiness to understand. As we saw in the last week also, I mentioned it, that for you to lift something, you need strength. But what do you need for knowledge? You need eligibility. And so, eligibility of what kind? There, we can say the eligibility for subtle objects requires an eligible mind. So, there are 20 minutes left. I can either go on for a few more minutes or we can stop and as I promised, I will give you 20 minutes for hopefully later on we'll have a big discussion about all these kinds of things. But in the beginning, perhaps you don't have, you may have, I don't know. So let me just in fact do this. If you have questions, then I will stop for questions and answers. Otherwise, I'll go on and take you to the next step of what the eligibility of the mind is. Okay? So let me just stop for a minute. Okay, no question. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so let me continue on with the. So now, this is quite a big topic that now slowly gets into the Bhagavad Gita. So what I'm doing is giving you the background to understand the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will do that sooner or later. We're going to go into it. So what I intend to do is after I finish the background, I don't know how long it will take, maybe another class, maybe not, I don't know. We'll have to see all of that. But after we do this, then we will introduce the structure of the Bhagavad Gita and also do a cross-reference on these concepts and how they are talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, because it is not easy to understand. It is kind of strewn all over the place, so somebody has to rearrange it and so on. All of that will go on. Okay, so let's. So now the next topic is, what do you mean by eligibility? So we've taken a first crack at it by saying that our I wouldn't even say fascination, but I'm struggling with the right word. Our involvement, our fascination with formful things alone is the lack of eligibility. Non-enquiry into something more than that. In other words, to non-inquiry about something being mithya. Because we take it as satyam. We see something, we just say this is real. The world bothers me, so it must be real. Not necessarily. We were talking about it in the earlier class also. This is very interesting. The earlier class is all about the Mandukya Upanishad, where we classify the types of dreaming that we have, and the fact that dream is a mithya, very obviously is a mithya. So there the objection is that, listen, the world bothers me, therefore it must be real. This is reasonable, because non-essential, non-real things cannot know the absence, the square circle doesn't bother me. Asatyam doesn't bother me. But things that appear to be, that are real, and not appear to be, I'm sorry. If something bothers me, then it must be real. To which it is said, not necessarily. Like, for instance, this is what we were discussing in the earlier class. Supposing you go to a movie, knowing fully well that the movie is not real. It is just a bunch of light waves going through that appears to be real. And yet, you are in tears. When the heroine is being butchered, not butchered, but a lot of problems are happening to this nice little girl. You feel for her. If there's injustice, you cry. How can you say, we say, that you can be troubled by non-real things? And as we will see later on, I'm just giving you all this as a kind of a life is a movie. It appears to be real, but it isn't. And yet you are bothered by it, just like seeing a movie. All this has to be proven. We are just giving you these statements without really proof yet. Nothing should be done without proof, but I'm just sprinkling these things in and so on and so forth. Anyway, going back to the topic of eligibility. This is a huge topic, and we'll be talking quite a bit about that. So I would say, at this point as an introduction, and this is then just as an introduction, I will just give you this and then give you more details later on. So this is what would be called eligibility to understand Satyam versus Mithya. This is what is the whole thing all about. We do not understand the distinction between them, therefore we take Mithya to be Satyam. But if I understood Mithya to be Mithya, I need to understand Satyam to be different from Mithya. In fact, if I can pause, I don't know if I'll actually have time to do all of this, but let me give you an interesting example of this. Okay? So this would be, this eligibility, in fact, I can even say that now. I'll put this in a context later on. The making a distinction between Satyam and Mithya is called a particular way of thinking called Viveka. This is also part of the eligibility, but since I'm on this topic, I might as well just spend a minute on it. So viveka means discriminative knowledge. Discriminative knowledge. Discriminative knowledge. Viveka. So let me give you an example of this. So the example is that there was a young woman that had, who was an actor. When I grew up, we used to say actors and actresses. Now the word actresses is gone. Everybody is an actor, whether you are male or female. I don't get it, but anyway, whatever it is. She was, let me just say she was an actress. So she used to have roles in the local plays that are done, okay? And she was a very good, well paid for it, and was quite popular. So she had 2 children, let's say both daughters, all this is important. A 3-year-old and a 9-year-old, let's say, 2 daughters. So normally when she goes to the play, she leaves her daughters with a babysitter. Because, she has to be gone for a long time, she cannot really. This one day she could not find a babysitter. So she said, listen, this is a rehearsal, and I won't be there for too long, maybe about half hour, 45 minutes. And what I want both of you to do is to take your scribbles and these days, I guess, games on the iPhone and so on. You become very sophisticated. It's really sad to see. I see these kids. These are 2, 3-year-old kids. They're completely absorbed. They don't talk to anybody else. Anyway, that's a separate topic. Anyway, so she told the 2 girls that you sit there and please busy yourself while I'm acting. And this is on the stage. Okay, so now here's what happens. In the play, she plays a battered woman. And her husband is slapping her and, throwing her down, and she's crying. And this is the play. Okay? So pretty soon the play starts and this scene comes in. So these 2 young girls, the 3-year-old says, what is going on to my mom? How come this guy is beating her? I cannot stand this. So the old one says, just be quiet. It's just a play. She says, what is a play? I don't understand what you mean by a play. He says, not a play, she's getting beaten. So the older one says, no, it's okay, just, she will have none of this. She ran onto the stage and embraces her mom and says, Mom, why are you letting this guy beat you up? The whole thing is just, the curtain drops and the director and so on says, can't you keep your children away? You've really ruined this whole thing and so on and so forth. This is called viveka. At a certain age, you cannot distinguish what is a play, what is real. At a certain age, the same thing is distinguished between a play and the reality. The 9-year-old has gotten enough. Her mother explained to her that, listen, this is a violent play that I'm doing. I get very well paid for it. Just don't think about it. It is just, it doesn't really hurt me. I have to do all of this and so on and so forth. So she says, okay, if you have to do it, I guess it's okay. The 3-year-old doesn't, you cannot explain this. This is, violence, this, play, money, this, that, or the other. She does not want her mom to be hurt at all. Very much like is our case. There is a play going on, and I cannot distinguish. I don't have the viveka. From a spiritual standpoint, I am still a 3-year-old. I hate to get hurt, and I get upset when people say things to me. And there is a huge play going on. And I have to play the parts properly. And if I do, then I get very well rewarded. And all this time, if there are some parts where I get hurt, so be it. But it's just one of those kind of things. So anyway, this viveka forms a bedrock of the understanding of Vedanta. So we will go into this in much more detail. And next time I will give you 3 or 4 main categories of eligibility. There's about 3 ways to look at it. And that is still an introduction. It's not as though just by understanding you become eligible, but at least you understand. It's kind of like, that happened to me when I came to this country. And this is how long ago I came. I came in 1964 to do my master's in electrical engineering and computer science in Berkeley. And I thought that my background was good enough and so on and so forth. I sat down with my advisor, Dr. Wattenberg, and he says, have you taken this? So I said, no, sir, I haven't taken that. Oh, okay. How about numerical analysis? Did you and your undergraduate from India, did you do that? So I said, sir, I don't even know what that is. At the end of that, he says, you're not ready for graduate school. I said, what? I've got a degree. I said, so what he told me was, okay, I'll compromise with you. You at least have to take the following 3 undergraduate courses. So this is what eligibility means, is what courses I have to. I haven't taken the courses, but at least now I know where my shortcomings are. So this is the topic of eligibility, and forms a big content of the Bhagavad Gita. Big content. Karma Yoga, this, that is all eligibility to understand this subtle knowledge which frees me towards the end. So anyway, we'll continue with that. So with that, I'll stop and just say, we haven't rehearsed the ending prayer, but if you can just follow after me like last time. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav. Purnamidam. Purnat. Purnamudachyate. Purnasya. Purnamadaya. Purnamevavashishyate. Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, do have a few minutes left, but otherwise we can.
Should we do attendance?
I'm sorry?
Attendance.
Oh, good point. Thank you so much. I appreciate for reminding me, yes. So just go through you might take a few more minutes. That will be wonderful. See, I don't send the attendance in the beginning because people are still coming in, and then I forget it in the end. So we have to figure out a best time to do so. Yeah,
Is
Larry?
it the next week that, that's
Oh,
on?
thank you so much. No class next Saturday, right? Just a reminder. I think I sent you an email.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be traveling to Sailorsburg Ashram. Some really neat stuff because we have built a huge new building there, which has cost us $10 million. It's just gotten out of hand. Swamiji, before he passed away, felt that our kitchen and lecture hall was kind of small, especially the kitchen area, was, if those of you that have been there. And so he said, let's do it. But at that time, it was more like a $2 or $3 million project, and we thought, but this just grew and grew, and then they wanted to make it green. So it is a very nicely done, completely not much electricity is used, and it's just gotten completely out of hand. So anyway, it's done. We got people to donate the money. So that's been inaugurated. And then the big thing is the anniversary of the ashram, which is, I think, 25th or 26th ashram anniversary. So that is being celebrated. And I'm on the board of directors, so I feel I should be there. So I'll be leaving on Saturday morning, early morning. It will be there on Sunday, and I'll be back on Monday. So just a quick 3-day trip to the ashram. Yeah. Yeah, I think we should just go completely one column and then back again to this way. Or you can do this later. You can leave now, but just